welcome to It's Your Law. Each week it's my privilege to bring guests that teach all of us about the law from one angle or another. They feel that the law is wrong, they feel that it's right, they tell us how to create better laws, enforce the law, avoid the law. And the law is a big part of our lives. We learn that every day if we read newspapers, and we ought to, and watch television, and maybe we ought to, listen to the radio, or just get informed however we choose to be informed. Well, I have a guest today that is going to be a real treat for us because he's an informant. He's been informing people for a long time. He's a favorite of mine for many years. Those of you who have a little gray hair will know very well when you get a picture of Jerry Burke on this screen. Longtime television reporter, anchor, currently a citizen and very active in the area, even though he's retired. From television, he hasn't retired at all. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Good to see you again, George.
Tell us just a little bit about your career on television.
Oh, we got all day. I was in radio originally. Before I went in the military in 1963, I was at WNAM in Neenah. I grew up in Neenah, Menasha. And then I went in the Air Force in 63. And when I got out in 67, I came and moved to Oshkosh because I was going to the university to get my degree, and I worked at a radio station that was at that time owned by Mrs. Kimball, Miles Kimball Company, WMKC-FM. And I was a nighttime DJ. And every Friday, we were firing the news director because they were incompetent. And one day I said to the general manager, I said, "Do you want me to take a swing at that cat?" He says, "Do you want to be the next Fire Friday person?" And I said, "I'll give it a swing." So I did it. And within a year, I mean, back then, if you think back to people that go back that far in 1970s, very few radios had an FM band on it. And so for us to have listeners was limited. But we made a name for ourselves, and the AM stations here in town they went, "Who is this character?" And that year, with the stories I submitted to the Associated Press, WMKC-FM became the first FM station ever to be named State Station of the Year for gathering news. That led me to get a job at Channel 2, and that was in 73. A little side note, in 73, I got a call, I want to say around 9 o'clock in the morning from Channel 2, wanting to know if they could do an interview with me about a job. At 10:30, I got a call from Channel 5 saying, "We'd like to talk to you about a job." So I set up and did the interviews. A few days later, BAY was in the morning, FRB was in the afternoon, and I chose BAY because I grew up with Channel 2. Bobby Nelson, Bill Whipple, Colonel Caboose, and Charlie Hansen. There's a name from the past. But I was at Channel 2 then for 35 years before I retired.
Well, in some of that period of time, I came to Oshkosh and practiced law. And they were trying to work you to death. I would see you at political meetings, at municipal meetings, at courtrooms.
Yep.
And it was hard to go anywhere with anything newsworthy happening where you wouldn't see Jerry Burke.
I worked a lot of hours. I was a single guy. I could do it. Thank God I wasn't married because it wouldn't have lasted. But you know what though, George, those were good days. I had fun covering those things. But as we were talking before we started this thing, today, since I've retired, I've served on multiple boards. I've done a lot of volunteering. And you ask anybody who's served with me on a board, they'll tell you I hate meetings because I covered so many when I was in television. Too many meetings are full of, well, we can't say that.
Well, sure, you can say.
No, I won't say it. But there's things talked about that have nothing to do with the meeting. I'm one of those. Let's get to let's talk what we're here for, and then let's go home.
Well, not only that, I rarely was interviewed by you. I did litigation in that period of time, and you would be at the courthouse, and you would have pointed questions, but you didn't want a lot of bovine faces. You you wanted a yes or no, or I lost, or why do you think?
Cut to the quick. I couldn't handle the BS, so to speak, well, and I hate people. Politicians, man, you listen to the politicians today, they do everything but answer the question. They've always got some workaround in there, the company line, so to speak, and I just, come on, just give me an honest answer.
Well, those are my recollection of the news in those days. The news was actually news. And I have always been interested in radio, did a little bit of that in college. I've always been interested in newspapers, probably read 6 or 7 newspapers a day for many, many years. Now I couldn't find 7 newspapers. The newspaper industry has gone underground.
Very tragic.
So, and right now, if you turn on the radio or the TV, more likely than not, you get a jaundiced political view. It's hard to tell where you're going to get the news.
Well, this is especially the case on cable. I think the local stations are still, I would say, good. The 3 major networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, are, to me, they still follow what I grew up with. Good, but when you get to the CNNs, MSNBC, Fox, and so on, they got a slant, and if you can't figure out the slant, then you shouldn't be watching TV. You should go back to Sesame Street. So that's unfortunately the way it is, and I mean, you can find what you want, but my motto is always, I'm not going to tell you what you want. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And that did me well in dealing with a lot of people, councilmen, judges, police officers, and so on. They knew if they told me something that I would report it accurately. That was where I earned a lot of trust.
Well, the key word there is reporter. You were a reporter back when we could rely on most media to report. Now, if people really want to investigate the truth and make a decision that isn't made for them by some propaganda arm of some political group, they have a bigger challenge. And we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you how they should approach that challenge today.
Fair enough.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Law. I'm George Curtis. My guest is Jerry Burke. Jerry Burke is a face that these people are going to recognize. They've seen it thousands of times.
At the post office.
You wouldn't get away with anything if you were caught on camera.
No, I wouldn't.
Maybe a couple of character witnesses, but you're your own character witness.
Yep.
At any rate, you're retired, but not really retired, because you're still serving in the most important job any of us can have, and that is of intelligent citizen.
Okay.
And you still, well, isn't that a fact, though? Isn't that a responsibility today to be an informed citizen?
Yeah, my grandmother, I have, every value I have comes from my grandmother. She always says, make sure you give back what you got. And I try to give back what I can. I did a lot of volunteering. I turned, I won't say what age, a couple years ago, but my wife put her foot down. She said, you need to fully retire. And she was right. I needed to cut back. George, I was spending more time volunteering and this and that than when I worked. And you know, the old adage, how did I ever get anything done before? And I was in that pickle. So about a year ago, I'm still doing some, but very limited.
Well, you're not very good at saying no.
No, I'm not. I do liturgies. I'm Catholic, and I do liturgies at the nursing homes, and I find that to be very, how shall I say? It's very giving, because the people are very happy that we can come in and offer them a little bit. So I enjoy doing it.
Well, you're being here with me today. We have no political connection, no religious connection.
Nope.
We're not even sharing in-laws or ex-wives or anything like that.
Yeah.
But your background in reporting and my background in trials, we share from a different angle a real appetite for truth, accuracy, letting the air out of the balloon, and what really happened here. There are usually as many stories as there are alleged witnesses.
Oh, yeah.
And I've always admired the fact that when you did ask me questions following a trial, it's exactly the case I didn't want you asking me questions because there was something that hadn't gone quite right.
Quite the way you wanted it, yeah. I remember that. There's one trial, I won't talk about that trial.
But I think we share a desire, an appetite for the truth.
Amen.
We recognize that the truth isn't always just one thing, but boy, it's different today turning on the television or listening to the radio in terms of the percentage of accurate reporting as opposed to selling something.
One of the things that really gets my goat, and my wife will tell you, and I've got her doing the same thing, is when reporters today are asking, especially politicians, a question, and they give them an answer that you know darn well is not the truth, they're not challenging them. I would.
And you did.
Oh, and I again, this is my grandmother's influence. I hate a liar. You lie to me, I will come down your throat like a leopard. I have no use for people who lie. And I will challenge you from here to whatever and back to get the truth out of you. There's a couple of former district attorneys, not in Winnebago County, that were regular liars. And they just hated to see me come in the door. There was one here in Winnebago County, and I think we'll all know who I'm talking about. He and I locked horns multiple times, and I was on his bad list, so to speak. And well, he paid his penalty because it finally caught up to him. But when people lie to me, I will go out and I will find somebody who will tell me the truth, and then they'll be embarrassed because I won't hesitate to report it. Reporters today, for some reason, won't do that. I'm going, why not? You know, you're letting them get away with it, and it's the old. I'm sorry, I get going on this. I could talk all day about that one. The other thing that really bothers me, George, about reporters today is I'll get my phone out and play like I'm a reporter. They're saying this is their source of accuracy. It is not. Your accuracy comes when you go and talk to the individual face to face. My grandmother taught me, again, thanks, Grandma, you can tell a person's lying by looking at their eyes. Your eyes will give you away every time. And policemen still use that today, detectives do. You can tell by the eyes if you're telling the truth or if you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes.
Well, the way interviews are conducted today is different than when you were doing it. The way the responding person gives a long speech to a yes or no question but doesn't answer either yes or no is different. The newspapers are a shadow of what newspapers
that's so
once
tragic.
were. Everything on audio, radio, or television is a short clip instead of any depth.
The only depth left on television right now is 60 Minutes. That is still a premier program. Pardon me. As in my years coming to an end as a reporter on television, we were constantly being, I'll say, harangued by consultants to keep our interviews, the answers we use in our stories, short, 5 seconds or less. I just said that, and that was 5 seconds. That's how short these damn. You watch the TV. Watch the answers that are allowed on the stories. If they're more longer than 10 seconds, that's a miracle. Its standard right now is about 5 seconds, and I just go, let them talk. You know.
Well, you wonder where the depth is anywhere. I still try to read newspapers. I read 3 of them between when I got in here this morning at 5 after 6 and 6:20 when Ron Bullock, our producer, came in and get ready for the show. And I said, Ron, you want to read some newspapers? Well, there was nothing in those 3 newspapers.
They're a shell of what they were.
Absolutely nothing. I get a New York Times, sometimes a Wall Street Journal, if I'm lucky, a Washington Post on the weekend. But even then, their political slant makes me a little uncomfortable. I don't object to people disagreeing with me. I kind of respect them that prove it. But where do we get the truth?
I don't know. You remember newspapers? We're dating ourselves, George. They had the newspaper and then the opinion page.
Correct.
Now the opinion's all over the place. Keep it on the opinion. But see, I'm old school, so maybe I'm full of beans.
No, we could learn something from you old guys.
Careful.
We're going to have to take our second break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from Jerry Burke as to how it would be if he was in charge.
Oh, boy.
And how people would get the truth.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Law. Jerry Burke is my guest. Between the two of us, we've had a lot of experience. Quite a few miles and a lot of years, and we haven't really wasted them. We have been on different battlefields, but we've been battling our whole lives. Now, you are at a point of life where you can reflect on what you saw, what you experienced, what you enjoyed, and what you wish had turned out differently. How would you set us in the right direction and keep us from going in the wrong direction if you think we are? How would you improve what this country, this citizenry would do? And you've only got 8 minutes.
Well, yeah, I think what bothers me the most is how the political parties, and I'm talking both majors, Democrats and Republicans, those of us that and I consider myself a middle of the road. My wife and I have voted for members of both major parties, from president on down. Both parties now are being controlled by the extremists. The Democrats have got their issues, Republicans certainly have theirs. And those of us that are, quote unquote, in the middle, we're kind of left out. We're going, what? And God forbid a senator or a congressman or a state lawmaker should think on their own and come up with their own. They all have to toe, quote unquote, the party line. What's wrong with individual thinking? It just drives me. My grandmother would probably, she was for a very particular party, and her brother was for the other party. And boy, they could have lock horns, but they still loved each other to death. And they both, I said to Grandma and Uncle Ralph one day, I said, you know, you guys, you both come together, you still agree on a lot of stuff. And Ralph said, yeah, you're right, Jerry, you're right. And I was like 8, 9 years old at the time, but you sit and you listen to all that great gossip during the Sunday dinner. I wish people could get back in the middle and think on their own instead of everybody has to do this if you're a Democrat, everybody has to do this if you're a Republican. What's wrong with individual thinking? I don't get it. I just don't understand.
Well, do you think political parties really are anything other than a way to raise tons of money from special interests who expect to be paid back?
I am not a certain fan of a certain congressman, but he told me about what 70% of his time, George, is to raise money.
What?
What about what about us people that are back here trying to whatever? I mean, with all the stuff that's going on with gas prices right now the way they are, there's finger pointing. Well, quit pointing fingers and find an answer. I mean, come on. You act like a bunch of... Never mind.
Well, it's all about money. You're probably familiar with the Citizens United case.
Yes.
And I frankly think that that's probably the worst decision the Supreme Court's made in the last 20 years. It really means that secret money, out of the country money, hidden money, can buy any election and does.
And it has been doing that for 12 years, and it's until there's a change in the court. I don't know if it'll ever change, but it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And I want to know where that money, I mean,
how can we fight the money?
I don't know.
How can you win without the constant mailings, exposures on emails and the computer and the television, and a recent Wisconsin Supreme Court election where about $3 million in out-of-state secret money came in the last week, and it changed the election. I'm not saying that the judge we got, if there's anything wrong with him, time will tell. He may be a great judge. But at the same time, it was bought and paid for by secret money.
Yep. And I don't quite understand that. And I'm out of that field, so I shut my mouth and just...
Well, no, wait a minute. You got 4 minutes to save this country. You're not getting off the hook. Well, what do we have to fix, Jerry?
Well, there's a lot of things that need fixing. One, when my wife and I go out, which isn't a lot, but when we do go out and we watch, I mean, there are certain stores that we will avoid going to because we look at the way parents are not keeping their kids in line. They let the kids get away with whatever. When I was a child, I got my ears tugged plenty of times, or I got a little slap on the tap and then shut up and behave. You go to a church these days, listen to some of the kids that are screaming in church. You can't even hear what's going on up on the altar. What? People are, what's the word I want to look for here? They're inconsiderate. And when people are inconsiderate, you look at the last 6 years, and I'm not going to point at any fingers, but go back 6 years, you can tell how inconsiderate people have become during that time. It was because of the way the person who was, it wasn't a good example being set in high places in this country. And you've got to show some consideration. It's like if you and I disagree, all of a sudden you and I don't talk to each other anymore. Well, that's not the way it should be. We should, okay, George, I understand where you're coming from, but here's where I'm coming from. And then we come to, okay, we'll agree to disagree, but we'll still be friends.
Well, I think you just made 2 great points, and I want to make sure that I got them correctly. One is civility.
Oh, look at drivers on 41. Any road in the city. Go to the roundabouts. Oh my God in heaven. The people, they're very aggressive. And then you hit the brakes in the roundabout because you're afraid this guy's going to go blowing by you, or a woman. And they kind of look at you and they flip you off. Oh, come on. Be considerate. It just drives me nuts. But again, I'm old school. So.
Well, I like your school, but maybe it's because we were born in the same decade.
Yeah.
However, we've got to get these people who watch the show to listen to us and give them a lesson. And I think part of the lesson you've told us is respect, listening, civility. Yeah. And I think you were bordering on the edge when you were talking about how people's kids behave. Discipline, self-discipline.
There's many parents who are very good, have very good children. And Mary and I, my wife, and I make it a point to tell these parents, you have very well-behaved children. When we take our golden, we go to Lowe's a lot, and dogs are allowed at Lowe's. And when Nikki is our golden, always she just loves everybody. And the kids will always say, can we pet your dog? And we say, of course. And when they ask and when they're good, I say, you've been very good, thank you. And I tell the parents, you've got some nice children. And then you get the ones who are the screamers, or the ones who will come up and they'll slap the dog. What? Where are your manners? And you can only imagine if they're like that in public, what they must be like at home.
Well, your grandmother had just one great grandson.
Thank you, George.
Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having.
I want to thank Jerry Burke for sharing a lifetime of honest, investigative, intelligent, educated service in educating the people in the Fox Valley about the truth. We don't see much truth these days. We hear a lot about talking about the truth, but the truth itself has become rather obliterated by money, special interests, political parties, propaganda. It's hard to find news services that we really can trust. It's become all the more important to be a citizen, an individual investigator, scrutinizing what people say and what they do, find out where the money is coming from, trace the money, keep track of the people we do elect, and see what they do once they start representing us or representing the corporations that gave them money. Never, in my experience, has it been more challenging, more difficult, and more important to play the role of the most important job in the United States of America, the job of being a citizen, and honest, intelligent, scrutinizing, careful citizen, and not following the club, but follow the people that we have elected to represent us. That's my opinion. I'm George Curtis.